Hello, friends. Today, I want to talk about a subject that's deeply personal to me in my About the Author Life series. And that is why I chose to open my own publishing house. There's a moment with many writers reach where the question changes. At first, the question is usually simple: how do I get published? But somewhere along the journey, after learning more about the industry, the question sometimes becomes something entirely different, like, what if I publish it myself? That is the point where the idea of starting my own publishing house began to make sense to me. It was not a decision made overnight. It grew slowly out of experience, observation, and a deep desire to keep creating without unnecessary barriers. Because once you begin to understand how publishing really works behind the scenes, you start to see that there are more paths available than most people realize. When I first began writing writing to publish, I assumed the hardest part of the journey would be finishing the manuscript. Anyone who has written a book knows how much effort goes into that step. It takes discipline, persistence, and an enormous amount of time. I actually once spent 2 years writing a manuscript only to submit it multiple times and have it rejected multiple times. But this time, what I discovered was that writing the book was only the first part of the process. After the manuscript comes editing, formatting, cover design, printing decisions, distribution strategies, marketing plans, and countless small technical details that shape how the book enters the world. As I learned more about these pieces, the idea of starting my own publishing house began to feel less intimidating and more empowering. I realized that many of the tools once controlled exclusively by traditional publishers are now accessible to independent creators. One of the biggest reasons I chose to start my own publishing house was creative freedom. Traditional publishing has its advantages, but it also comes with limitations. Once a publisher acquires a manuscript, many decisions shift out of the author's hands. Editors may request significant changes to the manuscript, sometimes even changing what was originally written, the core message. Marketing teams may adjust titles, subtitles, or positioning. Cover designs are often created to fit market trends rather than the author's original vision. Sometimes those changes improve a book, but sometimes they move the book further away from what the author intended to create. For me, preserving the heart of the work mattered deeply. By starting my own publishing house, I could keep the message, tone, and design aligned with the vision that inspired the book in the first place. I chose starting my own publishing house was the ability to move forward without waiting for permission. Traditional publishing timeframes can be extremely long. Manuscripts may spend months or years moving through submissions, editorial reviews, and production schedules. For some projects, that timeline works well, but for many authors, especially those who write frequently or explore multiple ideas, the pace can feel restrictive. Creating my own publishing structure allowed me to bring projects to life when they were ready rather than waiting for external approval. It transformed the process from seeking permission to simply continuing the work. Books are not just creative works, they are intellectual property. One of the things I learned while exploring the publishing industry is how much control traditional publishers often retain over the books they produce. Contracts may grant publishers rights to distribute, translate, or adapt a work for extended periods of time. In some cases, those rights remain tied up long after a book stops actively selling. By starting my own publishing house, I retain ownership of the work I create. That ownership matters because it allows a book to continue evolving over time. New editions can be produced, formats can change, and ideas can expand into future projects without being locked into someone else's time frame. For writers who create frequently, this flexibility becomes incredibly valuable. Another realization that led to starting my own publishing house was understanding that writing rarely stops with a single book. Most writers carry more ideas than they will ever have time to write. One project leads naturally into another, and eventually those ideas form a large body of work. Creating a publishing structure allowed me to think beyond individual books and began building a broader creative ecosystem. Instead of approaching each project as a separate effort, I could develop themes, series, and resources that connect to one another. In many ways, the publishing house became a home for the work rather than just a way to release one book at a time. Another part of starting my own publishing house that matters deeply to me is the ability to support independent creativity. The traditional publishing industry often prioritizes books that fit established market categories. Projects that fall outside those boundaries sometimes struggle to find a place within the system. Independent publishing has changed that dynamic. It allows writers to explore ideas that might not align perfectly with current trends, but still resonate deeply with readers. Opening my own publishing structure allowed me to participate in that shift rather than simply navigating around it. It gave me the freedom to pursue projects based on meaning rather than market expectations alone. Starting a publishing house also required learning skills that extend far beyond writing. Publishing involves production planning, design decisions, distribution strategies, and marketing awareness. It requires understanding how books move from manuscript to finished product and eventually into readers' hands. At first, that learning curve felt intimidating. But over time, it became incredibly rewarding. The more I understood about the mechanics of publishing, the more confident I felt about guiding my own projects through the process. In a sense, starting my own publishing house expanded my role from simply being a writer to becoming a creator who understands how ideas travel from page to reader. The publishing world has changed dramatically over the past 2 decades. Technology has made it possible for authors to produce professional quality books and distribute them globally without relying entirely on traditional publishing structures. This shift has created a new kind of creative independence. For some writers, traditional publishing will always remain the right path. But for others, starting my own publishing house offers a way to combine creative expression with entrepreneurial freedom. It allows authors to build something that reflects their vision, their voice, and their long-term goals. So in the end, my decision about starting my own publishing house came down to one simple realization. I wanted to keep writing, I wanted to keep creating, and I wanted the freedom to bring ideas into the world without unnecessary obstacles standing between the manuscript and the reader. Opening my own publishing structure was not about rejecting traditional publishing entirely. It was choosing a path that allowed creativity to move forward more freely. Because for many writers, the goal is not just to publish one book, it is to continue creating, exploring ideas, and sharing meaningful work with readers for years to come. And sometimes the best way to do that is to build the path yourself. So I hope this has shed a little light onto my decision about why I decided to create my own publishing house. And perhaps it has inspired you. Until next time, remember to stay healthy in heart.